What if the house you inherited was not a gift, but a secret message from beyond the grave? In the misty peaks of the Blue Ridge, Liam Vance and his silver wolf dog Silas discover a fortress buried deep within the earth. But why does a simple brass whistle make the very walls begin to sing? Is Silas merely a loyal companion, or does this wolf dog hold the key to a mystery that could change everything? What truth lies hidden beneath the layers of stone and shadows? Stay with us until the very end as we uncover a legacy of love that defies even death itself. Chapter 1. Echoes from the Ashes. The wind in New York City did not blow. It bit. It carried the scent of old exhaust and frozen concrete. Liam Vance sat by the window of his brownstone apartment. He watched the sleet turn into gray slush on the sidewalk below. Inside the room, the air was heavy. It felt thick with the smell of stale coffee and unwashed clothes. He had lived in this silence for a long time. It was a hollow kind of existence. Across the room, a massive shadow shifted. Silas rose from the floor with a slow and rhythmic grace. He was a magnificent creature. A wolf-dog hybrid with a frame that commanded the entire space. His fur was a thick mane of shaggy silver and charcoal gray. It looked like the winter sky itself. Silas moved toward Liam. His paws made no sound on the hardwood floor. He came to a halt and rested his heavy head on Liam's knee. Liam did not move at first. Then he slowly reached down. His fingers disappeared into the dense fur around the wolf dog's neck. Silas leaned in. His breathing was the only steady rhythm in the house. His amber eyes were wide and intelligent. They were the color of glowing honey. In those eyes, Liam saw everything he had lost. Sarah had found Silas years ago. He was just a shivering pup then. He was trapped in a tangle of briars near the edge of a deep forest. She had carried him home against her chest. She had promised to protect him, and in return, Silas had become the silent guardian of their world. He had played with their daughter on this very rug. He had watched over them both with a fierce and quiet love. Now Sarah was gone. Their little girl was gone. Silas was the only living thing left that knew the scent of their hair. He was the last witness to the life they once shared. A sharp knock at the door broke the trance. Liam did not want to answer. He wanted the world to stay outside. But the knocking continued. It was persistent. It was a sound that demanded a transition. Silas stood up. He let out a low rumble in his chest. It was not a growl of anger. It was a warning. Liam stood up. His joints felt stiff. He walked to the door and opened it just a crack. An elderly man in a dark suit stood there. He held a leather briefcase close to his chest. He was a lawyer Liam had seen several times over the last 2 years. "The legal battle is over," the man said. His voice was soft but firm. "Everything has been settled." He handed Liam a small package. It was wrapped in heavy brown paper. It was tied with a simple piece of twine. Liam took it without a word. He closed the door. He returned to the kitchen table. Silas followed close behind. The wolf dog's ears were perked. He sensed the weight of the moment. Liam untied the string. The paper fell away to reveal a box. It was made of dark walnut wood. The surface was smooth. It bore the faint scent of cedar and old memories. Liam's hands trembled. He knew this box. It belonged to Sarah's uncle. The man was a hermit who lived in the mountains. He was a man Sarah had loved dearly. Inside the box lay a few items. There was a hand-drawn map. It was sketched on thick parchment. The ink was faded but legible. There was a heavy iron key. It looked like it belonged to a gate from another century. And finally, there was a small whistle. It was made of tarnished brass. Liam picked up the whistle. It felt cold against his palm. He remembered Sarah talking about her uncle's home in Virginia. She called it a place of peace. She said it was a house that breathed with the mountain. Liam looked at the map. It pointed to a valley in the Blue Ridge. It was far away from the noise of the city. It was far away from the ghosts of New York. He brought the whistle to his lips. He took a deep breath. He blew into it with all his might. Nothing happened. No sound came out. Not a chirp. Not a trill. Only the faint hiss of his own breath passing through the metal. Liam tried again. He blew until his face was red. The whistle remained stubbornly silent. He felt a sudden surge of anger. He felt a wave of bitter disappointment. This was just another broken thing, another hollow promise. He threw the whistle back into the box. "I can't do this, Silas," he whispered. His voice broke. "I can't go to some shack in the woods. There is nothing left for us." He leaned his head in his hands. He began to cry. The tears were hot. They were the tears of a man who had reached the end of his strength. Suddenly, Silas threw back his head. The wolf dog let out a howl. It was loud. It was bone-chilling. It was a sound that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. It was a primal cry that filled the entire apartment. It was not a howl of sadness. It was a call to action. It was a command. Liam looked up in shock. Silas had never howled like that inside the house. The amber eyes were fixed on the box. Silas nudged the map with his wet nose. He let out a sharp bark. He looked at the door. Then he looked back at Liam. The message was clear. Silas was not staying here. He was going. He was choosing the path Sarah had laid out for them. Liam felt a spark in his chest. It was the first bit of warmth he had felt in months. He looked at the walnut box again. He picked up the brass whistle. He realized it wasn't broken. He just didn't understand it yet. He stood up with a newfound purpose. He began to pack. He did not take much. He took a crate of Sarah's journals. He took a few changes of clothes. He took Silas's heavy water bowl. The city was still sleeping when they walked down to the street. Liam's old truck was parked at the curb. It was covered in a thin layer of ice. He tossed the bags into the back. He placed the walnut box on the passenger seat. Silas did not wait for an invitation. He leaped into the truck bed with a single powerful bound. He stood tall. His thick silver fur ruffled in the biting wind. He looked like a king surveying a fallen empire. Liam started the engine. The truck roared to life. He looked in the rearview mirror. He saw Silas standing there. The wolf dog's powerful frame was silhouetted against the glowing lights of the Manhattan skyline. The tip of Silas's tail was bright white. It flicked back and forth. It looked like a small flag of truce in the middle of a war. Liam shifted into gear. He pulled away from the curb. He did not look back at the apartment. He did not look back at the life that was gone. He drove toward the tunnel. He drove toward the dark highways that led south. The city lights began to fade. The towering buildings became smaller and smaller. Liam looked at Silas. The wolf dog was still standing. He was staring straight ahead. He was looking toward the mountains. "We are going," Silas, Liam said. His voice was steady now. "We are going home." The road stretched out before them. It was a long ribbon of black asphalt under a moonless sky. The air inside the cab began to change. The smell of the city was replaced by the smell of wood smoke and damp earth from the open window. Liam felt the weight of the iron key in his pocket. He felt the brass whistle in the box beside him. Silas let out a soft huff. He lay down in the back of the truck. He tucked his nose under his tail. The silence was no longer heavy. It was full of anticipation. The echoes of the past were still there. But they were being carried away by the wind. They were moving toward a place where the mountains waited. They were moving toward a house that knew how to sing. Liam pressed his foot on the gas. The truck surged forward. The journey had finally begun. Chapter 2. The Fortress of Silence. The road narrowed until it was nothing more than a ghost of a path. Gray trees clawed at the sides of the truck. Liam drove deeper into the heart of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The air was different here. It was thin and sharp. It carried the scent of wet pine and ancient stone. Silas sat up in the back of the truck. His nose was twitching. His amber eyes scanned the shadows of the forest. Finally, the headlights caught something. It was not a house. Not in the way Liam expected. It was a mound of earth. A gentle rise in the hillside that felt intentional. Large stones framed a circular entrance. The structure was carved directly into the mountain. Huge windows faced south toward the valley below. They looked like giant eyes watching the horizon. Liam stopped the truck. He killed the engine. Silence fell over the valley like a heavy blanket. Silas jumped down from the truck. He did not run. He walked with a slow and measured pace toward the stone entrance. He stopped at the heavy oak door. He waited for Liam. Liam stepped out. The cold bit through his jacket. He approached the door and felt for the iron key in his pocket. It fit perfectly into the lock. The tumblers turned with a deep and hollow thud. The door swung open. Inside. The air was not frozen. It was warm. The house felt like a living thing. The walls were thick and smooth. They were made of earth and polished stone. This was the thermal mass Sarah's uncle had designed. The earth held the heat of the day. It kept the mountains cold at bay. Liam walked through the dark rooms. His footsteps echoed. Silas followed. His claws made a soft clicking sound on the slate floor. Liam found a small bedroom. He sat on the edge of the cot. The darkness was absolute. The silence was louder than the city's roar. It pressed against his ears. It reached into his chest. He thought of the apartment in New York. He thought of the empty chairs. He thought of the small shoes that would never be worn again. Suddenly, the mountain felt too big. The house felt like a tomb. I can't do this. The thought was a scream in his mind. He stood up abruptly. He stumbled back to the door. He burst out into the night air. A snowstorm had begun. White flakes swirled in the wind. They blinded him. Liam scrambled into the truck. He fumbled with the keys. I have to go back. I have to leave this place. The engine roared. The headlights cut through the white wall of snow. Liam shifted into reverse. He looked in the mirror. Silas was there. The wolf dog was not in the truck. He was standing in the middle of the narrow path. He was a silver statue in the storm. His powerful legs were planted deep in the snow. He did not move. Liam honked the horn. The sound was flat and weak against the mountain. Silas did not flinch. His amber eyes glowed like two embers in the dark. They were fixed directly on Liam. Move, Silas! Move! Liam yelled through the glass. Silas lowered his head. He stepped forward. He walked right up to the driver's side door. He dropped something into the snow. Liam froze. He opened the door slowly. The wind howled into the cab. He looked down at the ground. It was Sarah's old scarf. The blue wool was frayed. It was the one Silas had kept in his bed for years. The wolf dog looked up at Liam. There was a terrible wisdom in those eyes. It was a silent command. It was a plea. Stay. Face the pain. Do not run. Liam's grip on the steering wheel loosened. His shoulders slumped. He felt the weight of 1,000 days of running. He looked at Silas. The wolf dog's fur was covered in a layer of white frost. He looked like an ancient guardian of the mountain. Liam turned off the engine. The headlights faded into black. Silas waited. Liam stepped out of the truck. He picked up the scarf. He pressed it to his face. It smelled of cedar and home. He walked back to the house. Silas followed him inside. The fire was dead, but the stones remained warm. Liam sat by the large circular window. He watched the snow cover the world outside. He felt the box on the floor beside him. He reached inside and took out the brass whistle. He looked at the window frame. He noticed a small indentation in the wood. It was an oval slot. It was exactly the size of the whistle. He held his breath. He pressed the tarnished brass into the slot. It clicked into place. A low vibration began to hum through the room. The wind outside caught the stone pipes hidden in the hillside. It was an acoustic masterpiece. The house was not just a shelter. It was a giant instrument. The air moved through the vents. It moved through the hollows of the mountain. A melody began to rise. It was soft at first, a deep and resonant bass. Then a higher note joined it. It was a flute-like sound. It was clear. It was haunting. Liam's heart stopped. He knew this tune. It was the lullaby Sarah had sang every night. The notes drifted through the earth-sheltered halls. They were perfect. They were pure. The mountain was singing Sarah's song. Liam fell to his knees. The stone floor was warm beneath him. He finally understood. Sarah had known. She had seen the darkness coming for him. She had prepared this place. She had turned the very mountain into a message. It was an architectural voice message. It was a love letter written in stone and wind. Silas came to his side. The wolf dog let out a soft huff. He lay down and rested his heavy head on Liam's lap. The silence was gone. It was replaced by the song of the mountain. Liam did not cry this time. He felt a strange and heavy peace. He felt the warmth of the earth rising through his bones. For the first time in 2 years, he felt safe. He was not alone. Sarah was here. Silas was here. The earth was holding him. He closed his eyes. The lullaby continued to play. The wind danced through the pipes. The storm raged outside. But inside the fortress of silence, the healing had begun. Liam leaned back against the smooth wall. He listened to the mountain breathe. He listened to the song of the woman he loved. He was home. Chapter 3. The Symphony of the Land. The sun rose over the Blue Ridge peaks. It cast a pale and golden light through the south-facing windows. The house was breathing. Liam sat at the large oak table. He felt the steady vibration of the mountain in his fingertips. The lullaby from the night before had faded into a low and constant hum. It was the sound of the earth at rest. Silas was restless. The wolf dog paced the length of the stone corridor. His silver fur brushed against the walls. He stopped at a heavy wooden cabinet in the corner of the study. He pawed at the base. He let out a sharp and demanding bark. Liam stood up. He walked over to the cabinet. It was locked. He remembered the heavy iron key Sarah had left him. He inserted it into the keyhole. The wood groaned. The doors swung open to reveal stacks of rolled parchment. They were blueprints. Liam spread the first sheet across the table. His eyes widened. These were not ordinary architectural drawings. They were complex diagrams of wave frequencies and acoustic chambers. The title at the top of the page read, Project Restorative Acoustics. This was Sarah's uncle's life work. The project was a prototype. It was designed for soldiers returning from the horrors of war. It was a sanctuary built to heal minds shattered by trauma. The house used natural sound frequencies from the wind and the earth. It was a giant tuning fork for the human soul. Liam traced the lines of the copper pipes with his finger. He realized the house was out of tune. Some of the notes were flat. Some were missing entirely. Silas barked again. He was already standing by a section of the stone wall near the hallway. He began to dig at the floorboards with his massive paws. "What is it, boy?" Liam knelt beside him. Silas nudged a loose stone with his nose. Liam pried the stone away. Behind it sat a series of copper resonance pipes. They were covered in thick spider webs and fine gray dust. Liam reached inside. He pulled out a handful of dry leaves and bird feathers. The pipes were clogged. The voice of the house was being choked by years of neglect. He spent the next few hours working. He used a long brush to clear the debris. He polished the copper until it gleamed. Silas stayed by his side the entire time. The wolf dog was not just watching, he was listening. Silas would tilt his head to the left when Liam touched a certain pipe. He would let out a soft huff when the air began to flow through. It was as if Silas knew the exact frequency the house needed to reach. Liam felt a change in himself. He was an architect again. He was no longer just a man dwelling in a house of ghosts. He was a builder. He was a restorer. His hands moved with a precision he thought he had lost forever. He found the main chamber behind the library. It was a magnificent space of carved granite. Huge copper horns were mounted high on the walls. They caught the wind from the exterior vents. Liam cleared the last obstruction from the central flue. A sudden gust of wind hit the mountain. The house roared to life. It was a deep and magnificent chord. It sounded like a cathedral organ made of stone and light. The sound washed over Liam. It vibrated in his chest. It cleared the fog from his mind. Silas threw back his head. The wolf dog began to howl, but it was not a lonely cry. Silas was matching the tone of the house. His voice blended perfectly with the resonance of the copper pipes. It was a harmony of the wild and the man-made. Liam laughed. It was a short and startled sound. He had forgotten how it felt to laugh. They worked together as the day turned to dusk. Liam cleaned the vents. Silas led him to the hidden chambers. The wolf dog's primal instincts were perfectly in sync with the mechanical heart of the structure. The rhythm of life was returning. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, Silas stopped. He was sniffing at a deep crevice in the natural rock wall near the fireplace. He began to whine. He used his snout to push a small metal box out from the shadows. It was a time capsule. Liam picked it up. The metal was cool. He opened the lid with trembling fingers. Inside were photographs. They were pictures of Liam and Sarah. There was one of their daughter running through a park in New York. And there was a note in Sarah's handwriting. It said, "I knew you would find your way here. The mountain will hold you until I can see you again." Liam pressed the photo to his chest. He looked at Silas. The wolf dog's amber eyes were soft. He was sitting tall and proud. Sarah had planned this. She knew the house would call to him. She knew Silas would lead him. She knew that the only way to heal a broken heart was to give it a purpose. The symphony of the land continued to play around them. It was a song of endurance. It was a song of hope. Liam stood up and walked to the window. The stars were beginning to appear. The valley was silent, but the house was singing. He was no longer a victim of his past. He was the guardian of this sanctuary. Liam looked at his hands. They were covered in copper dust and mountain earth. He felt strong. He felt ready. The symphony was only just beginning. Chapter 4. The Guardian of the Valley. The peace of the Blue Ridge was shattered by a sound that did not belong to the wind. It was a rhythmic thudding, a mechanical heartbeat that shook the valley floors. Liam stood on the grass-covered roof of his home. He looked toward the eastern ridge. Huge yellow machines were clawing at the earth. The Northridge extraction group had arrived. They wanted the stone. They wanted the minerals deep within the mountain. They did not care about the delicate balance of the sanctuary beneath them. Liam felt the vibration in his boots. It was a harsh and violent tremor. It was the opposite of the house's gentle song. The extraction team began their preparations. They were drilling deep. They were setting charges to blast the ancient granite. Inside the house, Silas was acting strange. The wolf dog was pacing in circles. His tail was low. His ears were flattened against his silver skull. He suddenly stopped. He tilted his head toward the floor. Silas let out a sharp and frantic bark. He ran to Liam. He grabbed the sleeve of Liam's jacket with his teeth. He began to pull. "What is it, boy? What do you hear?" Silas did not let go. He was desperate. He dragged Liam toward the heavy oak door. His amber eyes were wide with a primal fear. Liam followed him outside. They ran 50 yards away from the stone entrance. They reached a flat clearing protected by a thick grove of oaks. Liam looked back at the house. Silence held for a few more seconds. Then, the earth groaned. A massive explosion echoed from the quarry site. The ground buckled. Liam felt the shockwave move through his chest. Back at the house, a cloud of dust puffed out from the vents. A minor section of the stone ceiling in the main hall gave way. Heavy slate crashed onto the floor where Liam had been standing only minutes before. Silas had sensed the infrasonic vibrations. He had felt the charge building in the rock long before the blast. He had saved Liam's life. Liam felt a cold rage rising in his throat. He looked at Silas. The wolf dog's mane was bristling. The silver fur stood on end. Silas looked like a creature from an old myth. He looked like the spirit of the mountain itself. "We have to stop them, Silas." They climbed the highest ridge. They looked down at the quarry workers below. The men were preparing for a second blast. Liam did not hesitate. He marched down the slope. Silas walked beside him. The wolf dog did not snarl. He did not bark. He simply existed. He was a massive shadow of gray and white moving through the trees. Liam reached the foreman. The man was holding a clipboard. He looked up and froze. He did not see just a man. He saw a titan of the forest standing next to a beast that looked more like a wolf than a dog. Silas stood tall on the ridge. The wind caught his thick fur. His amber eyes glowed with an ancient intensity. To the workers, Silas looked like a legendary forest deity guarding his realm. "This blasting ends now," Liam said. His voice was low and dangerous. "You are destroying a historical landmark. You are shattering the groundwater veins of this entire mountain." The foreman tried to speak. He looked at Silas. The wolf dog took one step forward. Silas let out a low rumble that vibrated in the air. The foreman stepped back. "I have permits," he stammered. "I have the geological surveys," Liam countered. He held up a folder of the original blueprints. "This house is integrated into the mountain. If you blast again, you will flood this valley. You will destroy the very resource you are trying to extract." The standoff was tense. The air felt like it was charged with electricity. The workers stopped their machines. They stared at the giant silver animal watching them from the shadows. Suddenly, A high-pitched scream of metal tore through the air. A drill in the lower pit had hit something. A massive plume of water shot 60 feet into the sky. The drill had pierced a high-pressure spring. The water began to rush down the slope. It was heading directly for the lower chambers of the house. "Go, Silas. Find it." The wolf dog did not need to be told twice. He turned and raced through the undergrowth. He was a blur of silver. Liam struggled to keep up. Silas stopped at a dense wall of briars and ivy. He began to tear at the vines with his teeth. He dug frantically at the mud. Liam reached him. He saw it. Buried under decades of overgrowth was an ancient iron wheel. It was a pressure release valve. It was the emergency system Sarah's uncle had built for just this scenario. The water was rising fast. It was already lapping at the southern windows. Liam grabbed the wheel. It was rusted shut. He strained. He pulled until his muscles burned. It would not budge. Silas lunged forward. He braced his powerful shoulders against the wheel. He pushed with Liam. The man and the beast worked as one. The metal groaned. A loud crack echoed through the woods. The wheel turned. Liam heard a roar of air. The water began to divert into a secondary stone channel. It flowed away from the house. It poured into the lower creek bed, where it could do no harm. The sanctuary was saved. Liam slumped against the rock wall. He was breathing hard. Silas came to him. The wolf dog's fur was matted with mud and leaves. He licked Liam's hand. The foreman and his crew arrived at the ridge. They saw the water. They saw the ancient valve. They looked at Liam and the wolf dog who had just saved the mountainside from a landslide. There was no more talk of blasting. The foreman took off his hard hat. He looked at Silas with a newfound respect. He looked at the house that was built into the heart of the world. "We will stop," the man whispered. "We didn't know." Liam nodded. He stood up and rested his hand on Silas's head. The guardian had spoken. The valley returned to silence. But it was a different kind of silence. It was the quiet of a battle won. Liam looked at Silas. The white tip of the wolf dog's tail veined hay. The mountain was safe. The symphony would continue. Chapter 5. The wind sings again. The dust of the quarry machines had finally settled. A new kind of quiet returned to the Blue Ridge. It was not the heavy silence of the forgotten. It was the peaceful stillness of a sanctuary. The legal papers arrived in a thick envelope. Liam sat at the walnut table with Silas resting at his feet. The valley was safe. The state government had issued the final decree. The mountain and the earth-sheltered home were now officially a protected cultural and ecological heritage site. No drills would ever pierce this soil again. No dynamite would ever shake these stones. Liam looked out the southern windows. He saw the green returning to the scars on the eastern ridge. Nature was already beginning to forgive. But Liam knew this victory was not just for him. He looked at the blueprints for Project Restorative Acoustics. He looked at the empty rooms that were once filled with ghosts. He had a new mission. He began to transform the house. He did not change the architecture. He simply opened the doors. He turned the sanctuary into a non-profit healing center. Liam invited those who were lost. He invited the veterans who carried the weight of distant wars. He invited the grieving who felt the world had moved on without them. They came to the mountain. They sat in the stone halls. They listened to the symphony of the wind moving through the copper pipes. Silas was always there. The wolf dog became the silent therapist of the valley. He did not judge. He did not ask for explanations. He simply sat with the broken. He leaned his heavy silver head against their knees. His amber eyes offered a primal comfort that words could never reach. Liam watched the transformation in his guests. He saw the tension leave their shoulders. He saw the light return to eyes that had been dark for years, by healing others. Liam found that he had finally healed himself. The seasons turned. The lush greens of summer faded into the burning reds of autumn. Then, the first snow of winter began to fall. It was a soft and graceful powder. It blanketed the Blue Ridge peaks in a coat of pure white. It covered the grass roof of the house until the structure was completely hidden within the hillside. Liam walked up the stone path to the top of the mound. Silas followed him. The wolf dog's paws sank into the fresh snow. The air was crisp. It tasted of ice and pine. They stood together on the roof. They looked toward the horizon. The sun was beginning to set. It painted the sky in shades of violet and deep gold. The world seemed to hold its breath. Liam reached into his pocket. He took out the small brass whistle. It was no longer tarnished. He had polished it until it shone like a mirror. He looked at the metal. He thought of Sarah. He thought of the journey that had started in a dark apartment in New York. He brought the whistle to his lips. He blew. The sound was no longer a hiss. It was no longer a broken chirp. It was clear. It was resonant. It was a high and beautiful note that pierced the winter air. The house below responded. The wind caught the stone flues. The pipes began to hum in a perfect major chord. The mountain was singing. Silas threw back his head. The wolf dog let out a howl that shook the very air. It was a magnificent sound. It was not a cry of sorrow. It was not a plea for the lost. It was a howl of strength. It was a celebration of survival. Liam watched Silas. The golden light of the sunset caught the silver fur of the wolf dog's mane. It made him look like a creature of pure spirit. The white tip of Silas's tail flicked back and forth. It was a rhythmic dance in the fading light. Liam felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the thermal stones. He felt a peace that was solid and unshakable. He looked at the valley below. He looked at the stars beginning to wake up in the cold sky. He realized the truth of his journey. Pain never truly leaves us. It is a part of the architecture of our souls. But when we stop running, when we decide to build upon its foundation, we find a fortress of peace. Liam rested his hand on Silas's neck. The wolf dog leaned into him. They stood there for a long time, two guardians of a sacred place. The wind continued to dance. The song continued to play. The echoes of the ashes were gone. Only the music remained. And for the first time, the music was enough. In the silence of the mountains, we learn that the deepest wounds are not healed by forgetting, but by finding a place where our echoes can finally rest. Like Silas and Liam, may you find the strength to face your past and the loyalty of a friend to guide you home. If this story touched your heart, please join our family by subscribing and sharing your own thoughts in the comments below, as every like helps these stories of loyalty travel further. Before you go, a new journey has just appeared on your screen, and Silas and I would be honored to have you join us there as well.